In the kingdom of Irinder, where rolling hills met the vast, endless ocean, the sea whispered secrets to those who knew how to listen. It was not merely a body of water to the people of Irinder, it was a living force, a timeless presence that held sway over their lives in ways both seen and unseen. The kingdom, ruled by King Alden and Queen Alara, had prospered under the reign of its just and loving monarchs. Yet, despite the peace and wealth that surrounded them, there was a longing that cast a shadow upon their happiness, a deep, aching void in their hearts. The royal couple had been married for over a decade, yet still, the halls of their grand castle echoed with silence. No child had come to them, no heir to carry on their legacy. Queen Alara, beloved by all for her wisdom, beauty, and kindness, had often sought solace by the sea. It was there, on the windswept cliffs, where her thoughts could wander far and wide, where her heart could lay bare its deepest sorrows. The rhythmic crashing of the waves against the rocks below had a calming effect, as though the sea itself could absorb the heavy weight of her grief. Alara had always felt a connection to the water, a pull that went beyond mere curiosity. It was a longing she had carried within her since childhood, a feeling that the ocean itself had been calling to her. But in recent years, that pull had only grown stronger, and her visits to the cliffs had become more frequent. With each passing day, she found herself lost in the horizon, searching for something, some answer, that would fill the emptiness in her heart. On one such evening, as the sun began its slow descent behind the distant mountains, the sea seemed to respond to her inner turmoil. The sky burned with vibrant hues of orange, red, and gold, reflecting the fire within her soul. The air grew thick with salt and brine, and the ocean began to hum, a soft, haunting melody that floated on the breeze, caressing her skin and stirring the depths of her spirit. Alara closed her eyes, allowing the sound to wash over her, her heart aching with the weight of her unspoken wishes. She had always dreamed of a child, of hearing the laughter of a son or daughter echoing through the castle halls. But as the years passed, her hope waned, and the empty cradle in the nursery grew colder with each passing day. Then, as if in response to her silent pleas, a voice rang out from the depths of the ocean, a voice unlike any she had ever heard before. It was soft, melodic, and yet carried with it the weight of centuries. "Your wish will be granted." Alara's breath caught in her throat. She spun around, searching for the source of the voice, her heart racing. There, rising from the water, was a figure, a woman of the sea. Her skin shimmered like the surface of the ocean at twilight, iridescent and otherworldly. Her long hair flowed in waves of deep green and blue, as though the very ocean had woven it from the tides themselves. The mermaid's eyes glistened like the moonlit sky, and her gaze held an ancient wisdom that seemed to see straight into Alara's soul. Alara stumbled back, her hand instinctively going to her chest. Who are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of awe and fear. The mermaid's lips parted in a serene smile, one that seemed to hold both a promise and a warning. "I am Nereus," she replied, her voice smooth and calming. "I have come to fulfill your longing, Queen Alara." Alara's heart beat faster as she stepped closer to the water's edge. The mermaid's presence was both mesmerizing and intimidating, her beauty an undeniable force. "But how?" the queen asked, her voice filled with wonder. "How can you grant such a wish? The sea, it cannot." Nereus held up a hand, silencing her. "The sea is not just a force of nature," she said, her tone deepening with ancient power. "It is a living, breathing entity, full of magic and mystery. And I, as its servant, have the power to grant what you desire. But know this, your child will not be like others. He will belong to the sea, as much as he belongs to the land. He will walk upon the earth, but his heart will beat with the pulse of the ocean." Alara's heart soared at the words. A child, her child. It was all she had ever dreamed of, and yet, a part of her hesitated. "I will accept him, no matter the cost," she said, her voice steady with determination, her maternal instincts overriding her fears. Nereus's smile deepened, her eyes gleaming with both satisfaction and a touch of something darker. Then it shall be so. Your son will come to you in time, but know this, his true nature will awaken when the tides are right. The ocean will call to him, and when that time comes, he will answer. Elara nodded, her heart racing with anticipation and uncertainty. I will wait, she said, her voice barely a whisper. The mermaid's figure began to fade, the water swallowing her form as she sank back into the depths from which she had emerged. Her voice lingered in the air, soft and distant. Remember, Queen Elara, she called, the sea never forgets its own. And with that, Nereus was gone, leaving the queen alone on the cliffside, the last vestiges of the evening light fading behind her. Elara stood still, her heart filled with a strange mix of hope, wonder, and foreboding. The ocean had made its promise. But what would be the cost of such a gift? What had she truly bargained for? The wind whispered through the trees, and the sea below continued to hum its ancient song. Elara knew that her life, and the life of her unborn child, was now irrevocably entwined with the ocean's secrets, secrets that would reveal themselves in time, when the tides were right. And so, with a deep breath, she turned toward the castle, her footsteps steady despite the uncertainty that filled her heart. For she had made her choice, and now, she would wait for the day when the child of the sea would come to her. In the months that followed, the kingdom of Erinder was filled with an air of excitement and anticipation. Queen Elara, whose heart had once been heavy with longing, now moved through the halls of the castle with a lightness that was contagious. Her pregnancy had been a thing of wonder, a miracle that seemed to defy nature itself. Each passing day brought new whispers of joy among the people, who had longed for the arrival of a royal heir. It was not just a child that they awaited, but a symbol of hope, a promise of a brighter future for their kingdom. The kingdom had suffered little in terms of hardship, but the absence of an heir had left a sense of incompleteness, a gap that no wealth or prosperity could fill. Now, that emptiness would be erased, for a son was coming to them, born from the queen's deepest wish, and as such, they believed, destined to bring prosperity and strength to the realm. The entire kingdom rejoiced as the day of the birth approached. Songs of celebration filled the air, and the streets were lined with banners and flowers. The people gathered, eager to welcome the child who was to be their future. Queen Elara, glowing with both love and uncertainty, had never been so ready for the coming of a child, but she had also never felt so aware of the weight of the promise that had been made. She had accepted the child from the sea, but now, the true cost of that promise seemed ever more uncertain. When the day arrived, the air was thick with anticipation. The birth was not an easy one, but the queen's strength and determination carried her through. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, a cry rang through the chambers of the royal palace. It was the cry of a newborn child, a sound so pure and full of life that it seemed to echo through the very soul of the kingdom. The child was born, and in that moment, the kingdom's hopes were reborn along with him. He was perfect, in every sense of the word. His eyes, the clearest shade of blue, shimmered with a depth that reminded all who gazed upon him of the sky after a storm, when the world seemed washed clean of all darkness. His skin, pale and soft as the moonlight, seemed to glow with an ethereal light. The room was filled with a peaceful stillness, as though the very air around him was touched by something divine. The queen wept tears of joy as she cradled her son in her arms, her heart swelling with love. King Alden, who had stood by her side through the years of longing, smiled down at his son with pride. They named him Eric, a name that seemed to echo with both the promise of the sea and the strength of the land. Eric was the child they had always dreamed of, the child who would carry the future of the kingdom in his hands. Yet, as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, there was something about the boy that began to stir unease in the hearts of those who knew him best. He was, in many ways, a child like any other, joyful, curious, and full of wonder. But there was an intensity in his gaze, a quiet, unspoken connection to something beyond the castle walls. As he grew, it became clear that his bond with the sea was unlike anything they had ever seen. From the earliest days of his childhood, Eric was drawn to the water. His tiny hands reached out for the sound of waves crashing against the shore, and his eyes would light up whenever he was near the sea. As soon as he could walk, he began to wander toward the water's edge. It was as though an invisible pull guided him there, a call that he could not resist. He would stand at the shoreline for hours, gazing out across the expanse of the ocean, his eyes lost in its depths, as if waiting for something, or someone, to come to him. His parents, though deeply protective, did not know what to make of his obsession. They had heard of the old stories, of the mermaids and the magic that lurked beneath the surface of the sea, but they had never believed in them. The kingdom had long been at peace with the water, and the people had lived alongside it, never fearing what lay beneath. And yet, as Eric grew older, his connection to the sea only deepened. At night, when the moon was high in the sky and the palace was wrapped in a blanket of silence, Eric would slip away from his bed. His parents had often found his room empty in the morning, the window ajar as though he had climbed out into the night. They would search the castle grounds and beyond, only to find him standing at the edge of the shore, gazing out at the horizon as if in communion with the sea itself. "Eric, where have you gone?" Queen Alara would ask gently, her voice laced with concern, but also with an underlying understanding of the strange pull that seemed to drive him. The boy would turn to her, his face serene, and offer no explanation, only a soft, knowing smile. "I was listening, Mama. I was waiting." King Alden, ever watchful, had begun to speak of his growing worries to Alara in private. "He is not like the other children. He has no fear of the water, no fear of the unknown. It is as though the sea has claimed him." But Alara, who had heard the mermaid's warning long ago, would silence him with a gentle touch. "The sea promised me a child, Alden. And he is ours. Perhaps, in time, he will understand his place within both the land and the sea." Despite her reassurances, there was a part of Alara's heart that knew the truth. Eric was not like other children. His bond to the sea was not just a curiosity, it was something deeper, something older, and something that could not be ignored. The ocean had given him life, and in return, it seemed to be calling him back, pulling him toward the mysteries of its depths. But for now, Eric was still a child, and the queen and king loved him fiercely, even as they watched with growing trepidation the quiet pull that seemed to grow stronger within him. They had been given a gift, a son, but what kind of future lay in store for him, and for their kingdom, when the time came for him to answer the sea's call? Only the tides knew, and they were silent, for the moment. And so, in the castle by the sea, Eric's story began, a story that would be written by both the land and the water, a story that no one could yet foresee. As Eric neared his 12th birthday, the kingdom of Erinder began to feel an unsettling shift. What had once been a peaceful, harmonious land was now plagued by strange, unexplained occurrences. The sea, which had always been a source of beauty and calm, now churned with an ominous restlessness. Waves crashed violently against the cliffs, spraying salt into the air, while dark, swirling clouds gathered above the water, casting a shadow over the kingdom that stretched all the way to the royal castle. The people whispered of the sea's anger, some believed it was a warning, others feared that the ancient magic of the deep had been disturbed. But none could explain the strange events that had begun to unfold. The winds, which once carried only the gentle scent of salt and brine, now howled through the streets, bringing with them a chill that seemed to sink into the bones of those who ventured outside. For Eric, the unease in the air was undeniable, but it was the whispers that haunted him most. At night, when the moon hung high in the sky, he would lie in his bed, his mind restless, as faint murmurs echoed through the wind. These whispers were not of the world he knew, they were different, softer, and filled with a strange longing. And they called to him. Sometimes, in the dead of night, Eric would wake to find himself standing by the window, his eyes locked on the sea below. He could hear the voice of the waves, calling him to the water, to the mysteries that lay beyond the shore. It was as though an invisible thread tied him to the depths of the ocean, and every time he tried to turn away, it pulled him back. As his 12th birthday drew closer, the sea's restlessness grew more intense. On the eve of his birthday, a tempest raged in the distance, lightning illuminating the dark sky, casting jagged shadows across. But Alara, who had heard the mermaid's warning long ago, would silence him with a gentle touch. "The sea promised me a child, Alden. And he is ours. Perhaps, in time, he will understand his place within both the land and the sea." Despite her reassurances, there was a part of Alara's heart that knew the truth. Eric was not like other children. His bond to the sea was not just a curiosity, it was something deeper, something older, and something that could not be ignored. The ocean had given him life, and in return, it seemed to be calling him back, pulling him toward the mysteries of its depths. But for now, Eric was still a child, and the queen and king loved him fiercely, even as they watched with growing trepidation the quiet pull that seemed to grow stronger within him. They had been given a gift, a son, but what kind of future lay in store for him, and for their kingdom, when the time came for him to answer the sea's call? Only the tides knew, and they were silent, for the moment. And so, in the castle by the sea, Eric's story began, a story that would be written by both the land and the water, a story that no one could yet foresee. As Eric neared his 12th birthday, the kingdom of Erinder began to feel an unsettling shift. What had once been a peaceful, harmonious land was now plagued by strange, unexplained occurrences. The sea, which had always been a source of beauty and calm, now churned with an ominous restlessness. Waves crashed violently against the cliffs, spraying salt into the air, while dark, swirling clouds gathered above the water, casting a shadow over the kingdom that stretched all the way to the royal castle. The people whispered of the sea's anger, some believed it was a warning, others feared that the ancient magic of the deep had been disturbed. But none could explain the strange events that had begun to unfold. The winds, which once carried only the gentle scent of salt and brine, now howled through the streets, bringing with them a chill that seemed to sink into the bones of those who ventured outside. For Eric, the unease in the air was undeniable, but it was the whispers that haunted him most. At night, when the moon hung high in the sky, he would lie in his bed, his mind restless, as faint murmurs echoed through the wind. These whispers were not of the world he knew, they were different, softer, and filled with a strange longing. And they called to him. Sometimes, in the dead of night, Eric would wake to find himself standing by the window, his eyes locked on the sea below. He could hear the voice of the waves, calling him to the water, to the mysteries that lay beyond the shore. It was as though an invisible thread tied him to the depths of the ocean, and every time he tried to turn away, it pulled him back. As his 12th birthday drew closer, the sea's restlessness grew more intense. On the eve of his birthday, a tempest raged in the distance, lightning illuminating the dark sky, casting jagged shadows across the kingdom. Eric could feel the storm's power in his bones, the electric tension in the air calling to him like a siren's song. He knew, deep within his heart, that this was the moment. The moment he could no longer resist. That night, as the storm roared outside, Eric slipped from his bed, drawn by an irresistible force. His parents were asleep, oblivious to the growing tension in their son's heart. He moved silently through the palace, his bare feet whispering against the cold stone floors. He had done this before, sneaking away in the dead of night, but tonight was different. Tonight, the pull of the sea was too strong to ignore. He made his way through the castle grounds and out into the open air. The wind howled, whipping his hair into his face, but he did not stop. The storm was near now, the waves crashing fiercely against the cliffs below, but it was the moon that captured his attention. It shone brightly through the dark clouds, casting a silvery glow over the sea, and there, standing at the water's edge, he saw her. Nereus. The mermaid emerged from the water, her form bathed in the moonlight, more radiant than Eric had ever seen her. Her long, flowing hair, shimmering with the colors of the ocean, rippled as though alive with the rhythm of the tides. Her eyes, the same shimmering silver blue as the sea under moonlight, locked onto Eric with an intensity that stole his breath. For a moment, he stood frozen, caught in the web of her gaze. "Eric," she whispered, her voice like the call of the waves crashing against the shore, soothing yet filled with the weight of something ancient and powerful. "The time has come for you to return to the sea." Eric's heart raced, his mind struggling to make sense of what he was hearing. He had known, on some level, that this moment would come, but the reality of it was still overwhelming. "Why are you here? What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice trembling, caught between fear and curiosity. Nereus stepped closer, her presence enveloping him like the ocean itself. "I have watched over you since the moment you were born, Eric. You are my child, but you are also the heir to a kingdom that is not of this land. You belong to the sea, Eric, as much as you belong to the kingdom of men." The word struck him like a wave crashing against the shore, knocking the breath from his lungs. His mind raced as he struggled to comprehend what she was telling him. "I don't understand," he whispered, his voice full of confusion and disbelief. "I am the son of King Alden and Queen Alara. I am a prince. My place is here, with them, with the kingdom." Nereus's gaze softened, and there was a sadness in her eyes that made Eric's heart ache. "You are both a prince and the son of the sea. Your true nature has always been within you, Eric. It has been growing, waiting for the right moment to awaken. The kingdom of men cannot hold you forever. The time has come for you to embrace what you are." The weight of her words sank deep into his chest, and for the first time, Eric felt the truth of them. All his life, he had felt different, as though he didn't fully belong. The sea had always called to him, but he had pushed that feeling away, thinking it was just the curiosity of a boy. But now, standing before Nereus, he understood. He was not just a child of the land. He was a child of the sea, too. And the pull that had always drawn him to the water was not a mere whim or fancy, it was a part of him, an inescapable part of his very being. "I don't know what to do," Eric said, his voice low, as the weight of his future settled upon him. "I can't leave them. My parents, they love me. They've given me everything." Nereus's expression softened, her voice filled with understanding. "I know. But Eric, the sea calls to you, as it calls to all who share its blood. You cannot ignore it forever. Your place is not just here, among men. There is another kingdom waiting for you, beneath the waves. You are its heir, its prince, just as much as you are the prince of Erinder." Eric stood there, the storm raging around him, the wind whipping through his hair, his heart torn between two worlds, two lives that could never truly coexist. The call of the sea had always been there, but now it was louder, stronger, more insistent. He was the son of both land and sea, and the moment of choice was upon him. The sea had given him life, but it was also taking something from him, a life among men. As Nereus's form shimmered under the moonlight, her eyes filled with both sorrow and hope, Eric knew that the time for decision was upon him. There was no turning back. The sea would not wait forever, and neither would his destiny. The call of the sea was growing louder. And soon, he would have to answer. The days that followed Eric's conversation with Nereus were filled with a heaviness that seemed to press upon the very air of the kingdom. The mermaid's words had carved themselves into his mind, and he could think of little else. The call of the sea was becoming more insistent, louder with each passing hour, and yet, it was not the sea that troubled him most. It was the choice, the excruciating, impossible choice that now hung over him like a storm cloud. The next morning, Eric tried to speak to his parents. He had hoped that somehow, sharing his growing fears with them would bring clarity. But when he entered their chambers, the king and queen were still blissfully unaware of his nightly wanderings, his sleepless nights, and the torment that had begun to take root in his heart. They smiled at him, asking about his dreams and plans for the coming days, their faces filled with the innocent joy of parents who still believed their child's troubles were small and simple. "You seem distant, Eric," Queen Alara remarked, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "You've been quieter than usual." Eric opened his mouth to speak, to tell them everything, to explain the sea's pull, Nereus's visit, the strange events that were unfolding around him. But the words caught in his throat. His parents, ever loving and protective, would not understand. How could they? They had no way of knowing the ancient force that had claimed him, the deep magic that had stirred within him since his birth. "It's nothing, Mother," Eric said finally, forcing a smile. "I've just been thinking about the future." The king, ever the pragmatist, smiled and patted him on the shoulder. "A prince should always be thinking about the future, Eric. Soon, you'll be old enough to take on the responsibilities of the kingdom. Your mother and I are proud of the young man you're becoming." But as the conversation continued, Eric couldn't help but feel the gnawing ache in his chest. They did not see him as he truly was. They did not see the storm inside him, the tide that was rising, pulling him away from them. And worse, he could not find the words to explain the truth. The sea, too, had grown restless. It was no longer just a distant presence in his life, something that he could feel but not fully understand. Now, it was a tangible force that tugged at him every waking moment. The kingdom's fishermen had begun to report strange occurrences. Fish were vanishing from the waters, leaving the nets empty and the boats coming back with nothing. The tides had shifted in ways they could not explain, and there were whispers that the ocean itself was growing angry, unsettled by something beyond their comprehension. The fishermen, once accustomed to the ebb and flow of the tides, spoke with unease, their voices laced with fear. "Something's not right," one of them had said to Eric's father, shaking his head. "The sea, it's not the same. We've seen things, strange things, unnatural things, out there in the deep. It's like the ocean's calling for something." The weight of these reports pressed on Eric's soul. The tension in the air was palpable, and though his parents remained blissfully unaware of the true cause, Eric could feel it all around him. The very land seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something to happen. And Eric could no longer deny it, whatever was coming, it would involve him. He was the key, the one caught between two worlds, and that burden was beginning to feel unbearable. Then, on the eve of his 12th birthday, Nereus appeared once more, rising from the waves like a vision, a creature of myth and beauty, but also of something darker, something older. The sea had grown more turbulent than ever before, the waves crashing violently against the cliffs, the winds howling in the night. Eric stood at the cliffs once again, gazing out at the ocean, the full moon casting an eerie glow over the water. The storm's rage was mirrored in his heart, torn between the world he had known and the world he was being drawn toward. He had not asked for this. He had not asked to be the link between two realms, to bear the weight of both the land and the sea. And yet here he was. When Nereus appeared, her gaze was even more intense than before, her eyes shimmering with a mixture of sadness and urgency. "The time is now, Eric," she said, her voice a soft, melodic whisper that seemed to hum with the rhythm of the waves. "The sea calls to you, and you must answer. The kingdom cannot hold you any longer." Eric's heart thundered in his chest as he turned to face her. "I don't want to leave," he said, his voice breaking, barely above a whisper. "I have a family, a kingdom. I cannot abandon them." Nereus's gaze darkened, and the air around them grew thick with magic, crackling with an energy that made Eric's skin prickle. "You are no longer just a child of the land," she said softly. "You have grown into your true form, Eric. You are the heir to both the sea and the land, but you cannot serve both. One must claim you, and the other must lose you." The weight of her words hit him like a wave, and for the first time, Eric understood the gravity of his situation. He had always known that he was different, that there was something inside him that didn't quite belong to either world. But now, standing before Nereus, the truth was clear. He was a prince of both realms, and one would soon claim him as its heir. The water around him began to rise, swirling at his feet, tugging him closer to Nereus. The storm raged in the distance, the wind howling in his ears. His feet seemed rooted